up, my fellow ninjas? Greenninjatale here, and today we'll be reacting to Game Theory FNAF The Grave Robber by the Game Theorist. Now, I'm not sure what this means by the Grave Robber. Like someone like steals like a gravestone or a a dead, what? I don't know. But, it's game theory, and it's a FNAF, so I had to wear the FNAF hat. So yeah, guys, the original link's in the description. Make sure to go subscribe to the Game Theorist if you haven't already. Without further ado, let's begin. Man, I haven't reacted to a Game Theory episode in quite a while now.
Game series.
Book series.
Help wanted.
New book series.
Oh, come on. Fine. Phone guy.
Phone dude.
Purple guy.
Orange dude.
Didn't you just... fine. Wild card. Change the category. Timeline.
Bite of 87.
Chomp of 83.
Party of 85.
Wait, but...
Time traveling ball pit.
You can't just...
Reverse.
Oh yeah? Reverse.
Reverse.
Reverse. Reverse.
Reverse.
Reverse. Reverse.
What was that intro about? I don't know. I don't understand.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory! Another day, another installment in the FNAF multimedia conglomerate. So, at this point, some people in the FNAF community really hate my guts. Like, ring me through a meat grinder and feed me to a rabid dog animatronic levels of hate. Like, for instance, this comment, and I'll read it exactly as written to stay true to his authorial intent. Quote, as a hard-care FNAF fan, he's a embracement to FNAF tourists. He insists on using the box to proof his stupid stories, and they don't even make sense. He sucks and thinks he's smart, but he's not. I wish he would stoop. He then goes on to rant for a paragraph about how unrealistic time travel is in a franchise about robot rabbits haunted by ghost metal, but I think you get the point. And though I use this one really over-the-top extreme comment as an example, seeing stuff like this is a bummer, because I don't know if you can tell, but I really do like this franchise, and I see my role in it as a person just connecting ideas or presenting new.
Yeah, I do like the franchise a lot too, cause I don't know, something about it. It's like I don't know. So I don't know, something about it is like interesting that keeps me going with it, and I like the characters. I don't know, but in like the lore and trying to find out more about it, and I kept stuck to it. Yeah.
Threads to consider in a franchise that at this point is massive and really confusing. But his comment does bring up something that I should probably address at the top of this episode, since it'll be relevant for today. My use of the, how did he put it? The box to proof my theories. Here's the thing, friends. I think this is something that both sides could use as a reminder, both my FNAF Theory followers and my FNAF Theory haters. There is a difference between canonicity and continuity, and I think a lot of the times in these sorts of discussions, they get confused with each other. Something being listed as canon just means that it's official. It is blessed by the person who is overseeing the rules of the universe. It is self-consistent within the boundaries of that fictional world. On the other hand, a continuity, at least as I'm referring to it here, is a timeline of events, a continuous story thread where one event leads to the next that leads to the next. Take Star Wars as an example. Rey having magic healing powers in Rise of Skywalker, or Leia flying around like Mary Poppins in The Last Jedi. Because they're appearing in official works of the franchise, those powers thereby get the green...
I had not seen the or did I? Oh wait, I think I did see The Last Jedi. Yeah, I did see The Last Jedi, and but I did not see the Rise of Skywalker.
Light as being canonical powers of the Force in the overall Star Wars universe. The problems people have with them, though, is that they don't fit in cleanly with the continuity that was previously established. If Force healing is in fact a thing, then why hasn't it been used to save literally anyone before this point in the series? Tell you what, it would have been really handy for old Qui-Gon Jinn over there in Episode 1, but the fact remains, healing is now a canonical Force power, which means that the canonicity of certain powers is presenting adding challenges to the established continuity of events that came before. Now, this is where FNAF comes in. You see, you can have multiple continuities all existing under the same canon, and it appears as though this is how the FNAF franchise is working. The original novels and the original games exist in an alternate universe from one another. They are separate continuities, and yet they are all deemed canon. This was all expressly stated by Scott years ago. Quote, "So yes, the book is canon, just as the games are. That doesn't mean that they are intended to fit together like two puzzle pieces. The book is a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, and if you go into it with that mindset, I think you'll really enjoy it." End quote. Now, what I've been trying to do with my theories, and what I think some people on both sides misunderstand, is that I'm not trying to use the books to solve a continuity. I'm trying to use the books to establish a canon that will then allow us to solve a continuity. The books present us with themes, concepts, characters, and motivations in one continuity that can then inform our understanding of a separate continuity, or at the very least give us questions that we can ask of that continuity. Charlie, being a robot in the books, tells us that in the canon of the Five Nights world, passable humanoid robots can actually be a thing. So are there any characters in the games who this may or may not apply to? I don't know, but it's a question that we owe it to ourselves to ask because it's been established to be canon within this franchise. Do we know what these little pins are on Baby's design here in the game? No idea. In fact, most people probably didn't even remember that they existed in the first place. But in the books, they play an important role. These are the things that allow Baby to transform into a human disguise. Now, is that necessarily what they're doing in the game? No, definitely not. Is the best and likely only clue for what they really are coming from a separate continuity? Yeah, in this case, yes it is. This isn't us trying to shove puzzle pieces together like Scott warned us against. It's about seeing that in one puzzle, there's a piece that fits in a certain location, and in a separate puzzle, you have a similar piece that might end up acting in a similar way. And here's the thing, you don't have to take my word on any of this anymore. Scott recently made a new post about all of this to clarify the situation. In response to the question of whether the lore of FNAF is solvable, he said this: "All I can do is say that some questions will be answered, even if it may not always be the answer you wanted. Be patient. Let me at least say this, future games will look forward, but look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past." So there you have it, from the creator himself. Does including the books in our discussions make things messy and complicated? Sure, but remember what franchise we're talking about here, friends. Messy and complicated is like the formal first name that Five Nights at Freddy's never uses. Call it McFNAF. Messy, complicated Five Nights at Freddy's. The long and short of it is that when it comes to this franchise, we as theorists have always had to be discerning over what clues are helpful and which ones are just red herrings. This is no different now. Back when we only had the games, we did it with the number of Foxy Toes and Freddy buttons. Did a missing button mean it was a new animatronic? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Now we just have to do it with time-traveling ball pits and sound illusion discs. And here's the last thing I'm gonna say on the issue, and hopefully it's the last time that I have to talk about it. At this point, where there's soon to be more books than there are games in this franchise, take a minute to wrap your head around that one. To dismiss the books entirely at this point is just short-sighted. And I'm not just saying that because we're referenced in the new book Fetch. Yeah, seriously, we're in it. From page, well...
I haven't read that book yet, because I haven't got that book yet. I have the 3 main books, and which was the Twisted ones, Silver Eyes, and the other one, and the Silver Eyes comic book, which I still need to get the Pit, and I still need to get Fetch, and I think I need to yeah.
Well, I read it on digital, so it's like page 250 out of 3,127. Quote, "Greg did tune back in, though, when Kimberly Bergstrom raised her hand. Well, he sort of tuned back in. He heard her question, is this just a theory?" She probably didn't actually
A game theory.
say it that way. That was just my creative interpretation of that line. Look, Ma, I'm an inside joke hidden inside the second installment of a multi-volume scholastic book series. I've made it. Anyway, meta discussion over. Let's talk about this new book and what it means for the franchise, shall we? Fazbear Frights #2 Fetch was recently released, and it is, well, if I'm being honest, it feels much less connected to the series than the first one. Don't get me wrong, the stories are still really good, if not even darker than the original 3. I mean, one has a young girl outright being mauled to death and wrapped in a sheet while she lays there dying, so pretty intense stuff. But the connections to the main lore are definitely a bit shakier this time around.
I didn't read any of the books yet. I didn't even read them. I don't like to read.
First book, Into the Pit, featured cameo performances by Golden Bonnie, Baby, Funtime Freddy, The Missing Children's Choir, and more. This one,
I like the little intro.
meanwhile, introduces us to a lot of new things. A smartphone-powered animatronic dog named Fetch, tiny free-roaming versions of Freddy Fazbear called Lonely Freddies. We do get some quality time with Plushtrap, but, you know, it's Plushtrap. It's like the D-stringer in the FNAF canon alongside the Biddy Babs and the Endoskeleton 2. Is that a hot take? Did I just offend the Plushtrap stands? I mean, the runt barely squeaked into Ultimate Custom Night as is. I'm just saying here, guys. Anyway, let's walk through these 3 new horror stories and what they mean for the franchise, shall we? Story number 1, Fetch. Greg and his 2 friends, Hattie, and Cyril live near Olympia, Washington. Greg feels compelled to explore an old abandoned Freddy's restaurant where he discovers Fetch, a fearsome animatronic dog with sharp teeth and an even sharper understanding of texting lingo. Quote, "How long has this place been empty?" Greg asked. "Fetch looks like he's older than my dad, but smartphones haven't been around that long." End quote. After getting scared out of the pizzeria, the dog goes on to fetch whatever Greg wants with increasingly disastrous results, killing a dog, ripping his uncle's finger off, and eventually retrieving his school crush in the worst way possible.
Oh my god, I did not know that. Oh wow. That's a one way to spoil Fetch for me.
Actually a pretty simple story, but there are 2 big things to call out about it. First, it continues a theme that we're starting to see develop in these books. Kids are being drawn to these restaurants. It's never explained in the story, but Greg feels compelled to go to Freddy's by some unseen force. Quote from the book, "This might be what he'd felt in the field, what had called him here." And again, a bit later in that chapter, Greg was afraid he might not have gotten what he was there for, had he done what he was meant to do. End quote. Greg is now the second character to have some sort of psychic connection to these restaurants. As I talked about in our last theory, Oswald from Into the Pit had the exact same thing, where he inexplicably found himself drawing horrific animatronic monsters without ever knowing about Freddy's to begin with. It's also worth noting that both are the first stories in their respective books. It'll be interesting to see whether this trend holds in future installments. The second important part of the story, though, is that it clearly establishes Freddy's as a place where technology is advanced far beyond where the rest of society is. As I read in that earlier quote, Fetch can connect to smart devices like cell phones despite being older than the kid's parents. The reason I call this out is that in theory crafting for this franchise, I've seen a lot of theorists use the more modern, sleeker designs of the Funtime animatronics to put them later in timelines. But it seems like this story is telling us that those sorts of details don't matter. Freddy's is and will always be fantastically ahead of the curve when it comes to technology, especially technology for kidnapping small children. There was a bit more in that story about random event generators and plants/machines being able to read our minds and summoning stuff to you via mental focus, but I can't quite think of how it's important to any of the actual overarching narratives for the franchise, so maybe it's a discussion for a mini-theory at some point down the line, but for now, I'm just gonna skip it. Story number 2, we'll come back to in a minute, as that one has the most to discuss. Story number 3, out of stock. A new Plushtrap toy, the Plushtrap Chaser, a light-activated chomping green rabbit, is all the rage, selling out at stores across the nation. It also retails for $79.99, so Scott be making those fat stacks both IRL and in the book world for his killer merch. A boy named Oscar, fed up with never getting what he wants, shoplifts the last one that someone had supposedly returned for being defective. Quote, "Is it just me or do the teeth look wrong?" Isaac pointed at the straight, slightly yellow, human-looking teeth that were visible through Plushtrap's partly opened mouth. "And what's with the eyes?" He reached out and poked one of the cloudy green eyes. "Ew." He whipped his hand back and flicked his finger. "It's squishy." End quote. After a few days of it doing nothing, the Plushtrap suddenly activates and terrorizes Oscar and his
That's terrifying. Where'd you find that image? That's terrifying.
friends, chomping through the house's doors and garages just trying to bite them. Their only protection is that Plushtrap freezes in the light. Quote again, he was turning the box over and over in his hands, and there in bold letters was a critical detail. Walks in the dark, freezes in the light. End quote. A few hours and a comedic number of faulty flashlights later, the boys destroy the monster at last by luring it in front of an oncoming train. A few things to call out here in this story. First and most obviously, it explains Plushtrap's Jeff's behavior in FNAF 4. He really is just a haunted toy that goes on a rampage and is stopped by the power of flashlights. So it's cool to make that lore connection with Plushtrap's original minigame. We also know, based on the story, that Plushtrap apparently has the ability to mimic voices. He has a speaker system built in under his fur and is able to mimic the voices of Oscar's mother and friends. Now, this is a really interesting detail because up until this point, the only voice mimics in the franchise have been the Funtime animatronics, with their built-in systems intended to lure children away from their parents so that they could be grabbed. This suggests the possibility that Plushtrap was either a prototype for those larger models, testing out the voice mimicry software, or was himself a Funtime-era animatronic. Whereas up until this point, all us theorists have classified him alongside the other nightmares from FNAF 4. But the last, and most important thing to call out though, is the fusion of human parts and animatronic parts. The story makes it very clear that the Plushtrap Oscar runs away with has both human eyes and teeth. Quote from the book, "Raj turned to Oscar. You managed to steal us the only Plushtrap chaser that looks like a half-human hybrid," end quote. Now, this idea of a half-robot, half-human animatronic is a completely new concept for the series. But is it? You see, in FNAF 4, we had ourselves Nightmare, the black, transparent, spooky bear that, if you looked closely enough, had a human brain in its head as a part of its design, a detail that pretty much all of us dismissed. I mean, all of us glossed over Nightmare in general as just like the embodiment of death, the game's Grim Reaper as the crying child slowly flatlines in his hospital bed, or, you know, just a figment of the boy's haunted imagination.
Oh, no, I see it. I never noticed that the Nightmare had a brain. Now I see it.
Context from Fazbear Fright, could Nightmare have actually been a real experiment? Was William Afton in his quest for immortality, or Henry in his quest for more lifelike robots, testing the human brain's ability to survive in and operate an animatronic body? This would make Nightmare the literal Frankenstein's monster for family entertainment dining. And even though I say that jokingly, it's also something that appears in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for FNAF Help Wanted, where we actively program a brain and insert it into Dreadbear's head before Hand Unit tells us this.
Well done. It's time to introduce the creature to the kids for focus testing and troubleshooting.
We know, based on the original trilogy of books, that Afton was obsessed with recreating living metal just like those original haunted animatronics. I see Nightmare, Dreadbear, and this Plushtrap all as potential experiments looking to do exactly that. Lastly, we come to story number 2, Lonely Freddy. It's my personal favorite of the bunch. In this one, we have rebellious teen Alec looking to expose his goody two-shoes sister Hazel for the fraud that she really is. Alec, in this story, is actually a really tragic character. He's a teen who acts out because he's ignored by his parents, and the main reason he's trying to bring down his sister is because she is always the one who gets the attention. The two of them inexplicably team up to torment their parents in the lead up to Hazel's birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's, with Alec planning on double-crossing her the day of the party. When the day arrives, Alec's plan backfires. It's revealed that Hazel is truly just that pure and good of a person. It's been Alec who's been the jerk pushing everyone around him away, thinking himself as the victim when he was actually making himself into the victim. With the parents just trying to cater to his needs and Hazel just wanting a brother who liked her, Alec runs off, ashamed of his actions, and hides in the storage closet. Just as he starts to make a promise to change for the better, he meets with a short little lonely Freddy, a free-roaming 2-foot doll made to entertain kids that are ignored or forgotten about at parties. But things are never quite what they seem in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The cute little bear hypnotizes Alec and then body swaps with him, imprisoning Alec's consciousness inside the tiny bear body. Quote from that moment, there, sitting across the table from his sister and his parents, was Alec. It was the same rumpled t-shirt he'd thrown on that morning before the party, the same ripped jeans, the same unruly golden curls, his light green eyes. "Hey," Alec said, the voice in his head quiet at first, but quickly it was screaming, "Hey, that's not me! That's not me!" His eyes, his stolen green eyes in his stolen body, gleamed at Alec. And then, the fake Alec smiled. As Alec, trapped in the lonely Freddy, was carried away by a store employee, he saw fake Alec wink at him from the table before returning his attention to a smiling, happy family. Dark, right? And Alec isn't alone. After he's puked on by one of the kids at the party, he's picked up and thrown into the dumpster, where he meets a couple new friends. One final quote. His fall was broken by dozens of plush bears that looked exactly like him. Dozens of discarded lonely Freddy Freddy's. Help! Alec thought he heard himself say. Pretty soon, it was every bear in the bin, their thin, muted screams for help swallowed by the metal and darkness that entombed them. Alec and his new friends, dozens of the lonely ones. Ah, what a great closing line for that story. It is so heartbreaking to see this misguided kid suddenly learn to love his family, only to have his chance at redemption ripped away by these animatronics. It is so sad as a story. But here's the thing, for as sad as it is, this story carries over yet another recurring theme that we're seeing develop in these books, that animatronics
That story took a turn.
are stealing the identities of kids. In the first book, we had the story To Be Beautiful, where Baby steals the looks and identity of a girl named Eleanor. Here, we have ourselves another robot AI, this one housed inside the Lonely Freddy module, stealing the body of Alec. This, to me, is right in alignment with what we've been expecting from Vanny in the new FNAF game that's slated for release later this year. Remember, in FNAF VR, we hear the story of Jeremy, and how he cuts off his own face in an attempt to reject the system taking control of his brain. And when we beat that game, it ends with Glitch Trap basically locking us away and taking over our body. We let him escape through us. But what we thought was happening on a small scale, one person getting taken over in one game, instead appears to be happening to kids in pizzerias everywhere. It's further evidence supporting this theory that I did on FNAF VR, where the story from this point forward is basically Afton creating an army, a cult, a bunch of brainwashed, or more accurately, body-swapped people hiding in public, hiding in plain sight, taking over bodies one by one. Kinda makes you wonder what FNAF 2020's got up its sleeve, right? But before we look forward, we actually have to look backward. You see, there's one last topic I'd like to explore with this final story, but it's a doozy. It's the parallels that this story has with FNAF 4. In fact, I believe that the Lonely Freddy story is helping us to solve what is one of the longest standing mysteries in this franchise, and also one of the strangest inclusions that we've never really had a solid answer for to begin with. And that, my friends, is the true story of Psychic Friend Fredbear. He's
Yes,
here,
the
he's
song.
there, he's everywhere. Who you gonna call? Psychic Friend Fredbear. But in order to tell
Yes.
you why, I'm gonna need a bit more
back.
time. So until then, my friends, there's only one last thing to say. Do you want to save money on pizza? Yeah, that's right.
No! We don't get to see more? No!
All this Freddy Fazbear talk has gotten me hungry for a nice old slice of pizza. Luckily, restaurants and food delivery are considered to be essential businesses right now, which means that you can still get yourself a steam and slice delivered right to your door by a service like Papa John's without breaking quarantine rules. But even better, you can save money on that slice thanks to our sponsor for today's episode, Honey, a free browser
Oh no! Yeah, it's over, guys. Dang it! I wanted to know. Well, guys, we're gonna have to find out next episode. So, anyways, guys, I hope you liked the video. I wonder, guys, what's gonna happen next. So, guys, leave a like, comment down below what do you think is gonna happen next. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you ninjas later. Ninja, go! Peace out, guys.
We'll be right back.